imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. It is November 19th, 2013. On tonight's edition, I'm going to be playing an interview I did about a month and a half ago with Beverly Oliver. She is one of the last surviving witnesses to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy 50 years ago. This week is the 50th anniversary. This Friday, the 22nd, will be the 50th anniversary of his death, his murder. And there are not many people left alive that were actually there that day and witnessed it. Most of the people that were around, that were in the plaza, are dead. I would say 98 to 99% of them are dead. There's only a few, literally a handful left. And one of them happens to be Beverly. And I had the honor of sitting down and having a very raw, emotional, and brutally honest conversation about what she witnessed, what happened to her in the aftermath, the harassment, and her speaking out. It's just very powerful, very, very powerful story. And Beverly herself is the epitome of what you would call a Southern belle. If you look up Southern belle in the dictionary, you will see a picture of Beverly's smiling face. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to get right to it because we don't have a ton of time and this is a long interview. I promise you it's going to be worth it. So sit back, put your feet up, get your thinking caps on, ladies and gentlemen. You're about to hear from a piece of living history. Here we go. My interview with Beverly Oliver.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I am joined by a piece of living history. Someone who was literally 20 feet, I would say, from President John F. Kennedy when he was assassinated in Dealey Plaza. Now, there aren't too many living witnesses left alive today, and as I've said to her off air, she has a lot of courage to come out and talk about what she witnessed, because a lot of people were threatened, a lot of people died, which her and I will get into, but it takes a lot of courage to stand up and tell the truth. So I want to introduce you all today to Beverly Oliver. Beverly, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, Popeye. It's my honor to be with you tonight.
It is an honor to be able to talk to you. And when I say that you are a piece of living history, I don't mean it like as radio shtick or anything like that. It's actually the truth. You really are a piece of living history. You're one of the very few. I think there's only you and maybe one or two other people that might still be left alive that were there that day in Dealey Plaza and that witnessed it. Not somebody that saw the Zapruder film or researched it. Not somebody like me that years later looked into it. I mean, you were literally there on the ground. So let's get right into it. Let's pick it up right there. And you can get as descriptive as you want. You're on the ground the morning of November 22nd, 1963, and you're there in Dealey Plaza. You're there to see President John F. Kennedy. Describe the what you see. Describe what happened.
Well, I had a brand new camera, Popeye, that a friend of mine, actually the man that I was dating, his name was Larry Ronco, had given me. He was the manager of the Six Flags Kodak store. And that's where I met him, and he had given me a camera. He had been home to New York, came back, and he had this camera. It was an 8mm Yashica movie camera, brand new. It was prototype, wasn't on the market yet. He gave me 12 rolls of film. He gave me 12 envelopes. The film even had to be mailed back to Rochester, New York, to be developed. And I was excited to not just to see the president, which that was, of course, number one desire, but also to take a film using my new camera. And so I parked my car on Commerce Street that morning, where I always parked it. The showgirls, we bought our parking places by the night in these parking lots next door to the club. And I parked my car, and I changed into my walking shoes, and I started walking, I guess it would be west on Commerce Street. And I walked, and I didn't have any plans, Papa, of going to Dealey Plaza that day. I just wanted to get somewhere close to the curb so I could get film of the president with my new camera. And I was looking up the side streets, and they were just packed. There was no way that you could get up to the curb. So I kept walking, and about 10 blocks, and I came to Houston Street, and I saw the people lined up, from Main right on Houston and then left on Elm. I didn't take even on Blonde. I still figured out that must be the way that the motorcade was going. So I walked across the grassy triangles and down to the end of the row of people, and that's where I was standing that day when the horrible murder happened in broad daylight in downtown Dallas. I was... that day, there was such an excitement in the air. It was like being in a situation where there's so much static electricity in the air that the hair literally on the back of your neck and on your arms stood up. That's the kind of atmosphere that it was in Dealey Plaza that day. There was so much excitement and so much anticipation. And you could tell when the president got closer and closer because the crowds got louder and louder. And I'm standing there, and they turned onto Houston, and then just as they turned left onto Elm. But I had already taken my camera and started and made sure that it was in working order. I took pictures of film of the crowd and of the buildings, just making sure everything was working because I did not want to miss the opportunity to film the president. And as soon as they started to turn left onto Elm Street, I started filming. And then just a few seconds, actually, after they turned onto, or it seemed like it was a few seconds after they turned onto Elm Street, there was a noise that went bang, bang, bang. And at the time, I thought that you're too young to remember those things we call poppers that they throw on the sidewalk and they'd pop like a firecracker, but you didn't have to light them. You just threw them on the ground and they
Yeah,
popped.
the little white sacks of paper with the black powder in them.
Yeah, that's it. And I remember thinking distinctly to myself, why would somebody let their kids bring those down here? And I'm still filming, and the president gets by me, and at that point, I still was not aware that he had been shot. Wasn't aware that the noise I'd heard was shots. And I started filming in concert with the motorcade. I was when I started, I was to the right of I can't think of his name now. The guy and his son, the ranger guy and his son, Charles Brim and his son, and then to his left was Gene Hill and Mary Mormon. When the murder happened, the assassination happened, I was on the other side of all them at the end of it. So I had walked in concert filming, and so you were talking about the people that were still alive. To my knowledge, it is just Mary Mormon, myself, and the Newmans. Just as the president got past me to my left, there was this big noise that went, and it was like the whole back of his head just came off. It came out, like arched out over the back of the trunk of the car. It just like blood, like a bucket of blood was thrown out of the back of his head. And I just went into complete shock, just absolute, total shock. People are always asking me, did the car stop? I don't know, Papa, whether the car stopped. And the whole world stopped for me for a little bit. And I don't know how long that little bit was. It was the most horrific thing I have ever experienced in my life. And to this day, I still have horrible nightmares, not as frequently as they were, because I did go under some hypnotism to try to get rid of some of it, and it has helped a lot, but I still have horrible nightmares about that day. And if there was a day in my life that I could change, it would be November the 22nd, 1963.
Were you hit with any blood or anything from Jack when he got hit? Like, was it, because I know some of the people on the side that, like, right there on the grass, or like I know one of the sheriffs in the motorcade was hit. So I one of the police officers riding the motorcycles was hit. So I'm not sure, how many other people actually got hit with any blood splatter or anything. So I mean, not to be graphic or anything, but
there has been people who have written and who have said that I had blood splatter on the front of my dress or my coat. Actually, I couldn't hit my dress because I had a coat on, but it didn't. There was blood splatter down at my feet at the curb, not exactly where I was standing, but on the curb side there was blood splatter. And Clint Hill, climbed into the back of the car, and a lot of people say the reason that Jacqueline was trying to crawl out was she was trying to get away. She was not. There was a piece of the president's skull laying on the back of the trunk, and she crawled out to retrieve that piece of skull. And Clint's testimony was that she tried to piece his head back together on the way to the hospital. I mean, it was just, you cannot imagine. The Zapruder film does not do it justice.
Even with home video footage now and news video footage, that stuff doesn't do actually seeing something that horrific, being there and witnessing something that horrific, especially, now people maybe are more desensitized because of video games and violent movies and stuff, but back then it was a more innocent time. I mean, I know there were nefarious things going on behind the scenes, yes, but the country as a whole, I think, on its face was a much more wholesome country.
People don't stop and think that was before the days of Watergate, the days before Iran-Contra. Those were the days when we thought, when the Bible says, God said, let us make man in our image, we thought it was God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and the U.S. government. We were so innocent. That's why I say that November the 22nd, 1963 was when I lost my virginity. I lost my innocence that day, Papa. And now, even innocent things that our country does, I guess I see conspiracies behind every tree. I don't know, but I question everything. There's not anything that happens that I do not question.
I don't blame you. I mean, that's an eye-opening event, and I mean, everybody has their own awakening. But that had to be something to witness. You were literally within 20 feet. I mean, you saw the whole thing. You were smart enough to keep yourself out of the spotlight and get yourself taken out like some of these other witnesses. I saw an interview you did with on the Men Who Killed Kennedy.
Nigel Turner.
Yeah, when Nigel Turner interviewed you, and I saw a clip, one of the clips, and you had said, I didn't want to end up like some of these other people that got shot in the back of the head with a shotgun, and I don't blame you.
It wasn't that I was so smart, but I surrounded myself, like I still do today, with very smart people. So, I had a cushion to keep me doing the right things.
At least you had somebody looking out for you, and if obviously if they didn't, we wouldn't have the valuable insight. Not only but what you witnessed, but your thoughts and your research as well into it. And I think it's so interesting how this experience automatically, like you just said, now you see conspiracies behind everything. And I don't think it's that you see conspiracies behind everything. I just think it's you see through the BS. And now you had your fog, that fog of whatever, lifted off your eyes. That, like you said, you lost your virginity on November 22nd, 1963. I think that's a very poetic way to put what happened to this country in a perspective.
But through it all, Papa, I want to say this. Through it all, I am still in love with America. I'm still one of these people that cry when his flag goes by. And I hope I always have that in me, because I know that America has spots, blemishes, and wrinkles. That's because we as Americans have spots, blemishes, and wrinkles. But we're still the best country on the face of this earth, and we always will be. And I do believe that from the bottom of my heart.
So you mean to tell me you're not some sort of communist tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, government-hating, whatever other moniker they could throw you? You know what I mean? And of course, I'm being facetious. I know that. No, you are a true patriot, Beverly, through and through. You really are. Again, it takes a lot of courage to stand up and even just tell your story. So many people were threatened, and I know even yourself went through a deal of intimidation. So, in fact, I want to get into that a little bit. So, you witnessed President Kennedy getting shot. You witnessed this horrific event, which obviously has left a mark on you for forever. Something that'll never go away. It's a memory that will always be with you. You witnessed this horrific event. What happens next? I mean, you just watched the President of the United States get his head blown off. Like you said, everything stopped for you. You're in this daze. Time slows down. I understand what you mean about that, by the way, because if you've ever witnessed someone die, that especially someone that you might have admiration or you care about, or that you're close to in some way, shape, or form, it's very, or even if you're just on the scene when someone just dies, it's a very weird scenario. The world gets very quiet, almost like you're in a vacuum, and everything around you gets very light, there's almost like a white light. I don't know how to describe it, but I've witnessed it myself, so I can understand kind of like what you mean by when time stops and everything. I have an understanding of what you went through. So you're in this vacuum, everything is just, and it's almost like you're stuck in time, and then whoom, everything comes back into the moment, and you're back in real time. What happens next?
And then that's almost like fast-paced when that happens. It's almost like you're going faster than the world does. And I don't know how long I stood there with my camera. There's a picture of me standing there with everybody else on the ground. I'm standing there with my camera up to my chest in shock. And I don't know when I finally walked across the street, but I finally walked across the street. And let me correct some things that are being said, if you don't mind, at this point. I did not run up the steps. That is another lady wearing the same type of coat, a little bit darker than mine, and she was standing down closer to the depository building. She also had on a scarf, not exactly like mine, but similar to the one I had on, and she is the lady running up the steps. That is not me. I walked across. I joined a group of people down at the bottom of the steps over to, as you face the steps to the right just a little bit. There's a picture of me standing there. And I kept thinking, they're going to want to talk to me in a minute. I saw people take people, because I didn't even know about the Secret Service and all that stuff. I was a kid. And I was watching them take people aside to talk to them. I thought, well, they're going to want to talk to me in a minute. And I stood there for a little while. And then I saw this policeman that I know come across the hill, the knoll part off of the pergola, down on the grass, and was walking somewhere, and I recognized him as a policeman I was used to seeing all the time. He was married to Jack Ruby's hostess. Her name was Geneva White. And I was used to seeing him every night when I would go over to go out with some of the girls up there, we would go out to the Alabama Club at night afterwards. It stayed up until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, or 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. You had a band and everything, and we'd go out there dancing afterwards. And so most of the time I was over there, either to pick up Zada or Shari or somebody, and we'd go out. And so I was just sitting this cop. I knew who I saw. And even though I had on dark wig that day, he was used to seeing me in dark hair, blonde hair, blue hair, green hair. I wore all colors of hair back then. It was the thing to do. And so I knew he recognized me. When I saw him and made eye contact with him, I knew he knew who I was. So I also realized if they wanted to talk to me, he knew where to find me. We didn't know what had happened to the president yet. You know, there wasn't any such things as cell phones and stuff like that. We were all in the dark. I didn't know if he was dead. I didn't know if he was alive. I didn't know, I didn't know if everybody in the car had been killed. I didn't know. And so I wanted to get back to my car and get to the radio. So I hot-tailed it back down to the parking garage, got in my car, and I had an old Buick. And I went down to 75, which is North Central Expressway, and then you could turn left on the North Central Expressway. And there used to be a Holiday Inn almost in downtown. It was the old-timey kind, one level, and you parked at your door and got out and walked in. And it was one of the premier hotels in Dallas at the time. And I pulled off, I remember just before I got to the exit to that hotel, hearing on the radio, because it was an old car, the radio wouldn't work in the high buildings downtown. And I heard it right there just before I got to that hotel, which was really almost downtown. And I pulled off to that parking lot and sat there and cried. For how long, I don't remember. But it was a horrific day, absolutely horrific.
Now you're sitting in the you're sitting in the car, and I guess the gravity of the situation hits you. So the world is now suddenly drastically changed for you. Everything is different. And again, like you said, you didn't know anything, about the government or the inner workings. You didn't have the level of knowledge that you have now. The wisdom. Mm-hmm. So, how long after that day was it before you were approached for an impromptu interview / harassment / confiscation of your film? Did you ever go back and watch the footage before it was confiscated?
No. Well, you couldn't back then. Back then you couldn't, especially with experimental film. It had to be mailed off to Rochester to Kodak to be developed. And you couldn't just drop your film off at the corner drugstore and pick it up an hour later like you can now. You would drop it off, and 2 weeks later you'd get it back. And so, no, I never saw the film. I went home that day, and I took some Tylenol and went to sleep because I was just totally blown away. That's the only way I can explain it. I was just totally out of it. And I went to sleep, and but another strange thing happened, and my brother hasn't been able to explain it to this day. I walked into the living room, and the reason why they couldn't find me at first was because my apartment I'd given up November the 1st, and my apartment was not going to be ready for me to move in until December the 1st. So I was living out in Garland, Texas with my mom and dad and my brother. And I walked into the house, and he's cleaning his guns. And he said, I thought I might need this. And I said, why? He said, I don't know, I just thought I might need it. And that's all he's ever said. He's never explained that to me, why he felt that way, why he was doing that to this day, and he's still alive, lives 7 miles from me. And so I went to sleep, and my mother worked, and she got home about 4:30, I guess it was 4:30. And she came in and woke me up, and she said, I want to go down, I want to see the fires. I said, Mom, I'm not going down there. My mother never drove in her whole life. She never had a driver's license. And I said, I'm not going down there, Mama. She said, I want you to take me down there. And so I got up, and I drove my mother down, and I got beautiful stills. We took that day of the flowers. I got back home. I knocked myself back out. I didn't go to work that night. Abe Weinstein, in an interview that we did for him for my book, Nightmare in Dallas, he said that we were open that night, and I just didn't come to work. But I don't think so. I think he's not remembering it correctly. I don't think anybody was open downtown that night. And but I didn't go. It doesn't matter whether they're open or not. I did not go. And I went, I took my mom down, came back, took some more Tylenol, went to sleep. Did the same thing Saturday. And she said, you're going to get up. I want to go see the flowers today. And I said, Mother, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do that. And she said, well, you're going to have to. And I said, well, I'm just not going to. Well, she made me down there that day. So I have pictures of Friday and Saturday down at the Plaza of the Flowers, and one of them has my mother standing in the background. And I gave, for the first time, I let somebody use them in a book, and that's Robert Groden's new book. Those pictures are going to be in his new book. And I came back home. I knocked myself out again. And I, to this day, sleep with a television on in my room because, to me, it drowns out the noises. And so if I hear something subconsciously in my sleep, it'll tell me that it's the television, so I don't startle awake. And Sunday, I woke up, and the first thing I see is my friend Jack Ruby blowing away a man that he had introduced to me 2 to 3 weeks before that as his friend Oswald with the CIA. And at 17, I didn't know what the CIA was. 67, I still don't know what they are.
I'm going to pause it right there, ladies and gentlemen. Break sneaking up on us. We get back, I'll pick it up right where we're leaving off. Powerful, powerful testimony so far. She's seen President Kennedy shot. There's 20 feet of her. And then after that, she turns on the TV and she sees her friend, Jack Ruby, killing a guy on live television. Remember the first murder, by the way, on live television. And the guy he's killing is someone else that she knows, that she's been introduced to by Jack as a friend of Jack's. Her world was upside down. So we'll leave it right there. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, more with my interview with Beverly Oliver. Stay tuned. We are back from break, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get right back into it. My interview with JFK Assassination witness, one of the very last surviving witnesses from 50 years ago. She was about 20 feet from the president when he was shot. And right before we went to break, she was saying how not only has she suffered through witnessing that, and that was a traumatic experience, but then a few days later, she witnesses her friend Jack Ruby killing Lee Harvey Oswald on national television. So let's get right back into it. Here we go.
I could not, my brain would not compute what I had just seen and heard. That this man that Jack Ruby knew had been arrested, and I saw his arrest and realized that's who it was, but nothing was connected at that point to Jack Ruby. And then Jack Ruby walks into the basement of the police department and blows this man away on national television. That's just more than anybody's brain can absorb. And I, at that point, had no idea what they were talking about. They were telling us that he was up in the 6th floor of the depository building. Well, the shots didn't come from there. The shots came from the picket fence. And I'm trying to absorb and put this all together in my drug-stupid mind. What happened? What am I hearing? Why am I hearing this? Why are these people that are supposed to be leaders, why are they telling me this? This didn't happen. I didn't go to work Sunday night. Well, on Monday night, my mother was a very smart lady. She realized that I was going to sit there and drug myself in bed shape. And she made me get up and she made me go to work. She said, "You are not going to do this, not at my house. You're not." So I drug myself up. I took a shower. I got ready. I went to work. And I arrived at 7:45, just like I always did. And there was 2 men up at on the landing of the club. You went up a flight of stairs. There was a landing up the 2nd flight of stairs into the store, into the club. But I wasn't disturbed because I was used to people waiting on that landing for their people who park in the car or whatever to catch up with them. And so I made my way up to the landing, and the taller of the 2 men stepped forward, introduced himself. He had proper FBI, or I guess it was proper FBI identification. The other guy flashed his identification. I don't remember his name. I remember what he looks like, but I don't remember his name. And the guy who stepped forward and said, "Miss Oliver," and I said, "Yes." He said, "We understand you were down at the Grassy Place." He didn't say Dewey Plaza. He said the Grassy Place, taking film when the president was killed. And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Have you had that film developed?" And I said, "No, sir, I haven't." He said, "Where is it?" I said, "It's in my camera." He said, "Where is your camera?" Well, we all carried train cases back then with our makeup in it. And I said, "Well, it's here in my makeup case." He said, "Well, we want to take that film and develop it and look at it for evidence, and we'll get it back to you in a few days." That was November the 25th, 1963, and no one's seen it since.
Have you ever put in a request to get your film back from them?
No, and I never will. Other people have done it for me, though, and one thing that does stick out in my mind, one document that I have a copy of from the FBI, it says, the film which was taken, not claimed to be, not supposedly have been taken, the film which was taken by Beverly Oliver was not retained by this office. So what does that mean? Retain means to have and to hold, to keep. So does that mean they had it run across the hall so they could say that? What does that mean? They admit evidently having it. The film which was taken by Beverly Oliver was not retained by this office. Doesn't say they didn't confiscate it. Doesn't say they never had it. So what did they do with it?
Yeah, who did they give it to? Because obviously all they're saying is, look, we didn't hold on to it. They didn't even deny that they didn't even say that you didn't shoot any film.
Yeah, they didn't say supposedly, possibly, could have been. The film which was taken by Beverly Oliver. At least they got that part of it right. And the FBI agent that confiscated my film, his name was Regis Kennedy, and he was sent out Monday morning from New Orleans as a field agent to help investigate the president's death. There was also another document that I have that makes reference to a lady in a brown overcoat, or tan, I forget if it was just brown or tan, anyway, an overcoat, taking pictures at the time that the president was killed, and the school book depository would evidently have been in the background of her pictures. That was the morning of the 25th. I think it went out about 11 o'clock. At 7:45 that night, that's when they confiscated my film.
Coincidence? I don't think so.
I don't either. And then an even bigger coincidence of that was during the House Select Committee on Assassinations. When they were investigating, they were calling Regis Kennedy before them to do nothing but give testimony about my film, and he died. Suddenly?
Just out of nowhere?
That's what I heard. That was like 4 weeks before he just died. Now I don't know about exactly the time frame, but it was real close to when he was supposed to testify. He didn't make it to Washington.
A lot of witnesses and investigators or people connected to this whole debacle seem to suffer untimely deaths. So I'm sure that was weighing on your mind. After the FBI comes in and takes they come into your place of work and they take your film from you. Were you harassed anymore after that by any of them, or did it just everything went back to normal?
I don't know who them are, but yes, I don't know. I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but just like my boss telling me, don't go see Jack Ruby. Keep your butt away from them. The FBI is following everybody that comes by there. Don't tell anybody you were there. Don't do this. Don't do that. And then Shari Angel's husband, Wally Western, said, don't do that. He disappeared for a while, but he wasn't killed like everybody thought. We finally found him. Just like little Lynn only died 2 years ago. She was not dead all these years. She died 2 years ago. Her son called me. He found my number in some of her stuff and called me. And so I know for sure she's dead now. But there's just a lot of surrounding peripheral issues like that are also pretty scary. And I'm really not, everybody sees me as being a very gregarious, outgoing person. I'm really not. I'm very much a recluse. When I'm out in public, I'm an entertainer. That's what I do. But I'm really very reclusive, and I think a lot of it goes back to them. So it was easy for me to be manipulated into shutting up and keeping my mouth shut. And the way that I actually came out, now I talked to my friends. They all knew about it. And, of course, my family all knew, but the way that I came out was totally by accident. I never intended to be this brave witness that you're talking about, this brave piece of history. That was never my idea in my life. My first husband, George Albert McGinn, was murdered. He was shot in the back 4 times in the abdomen once in a gangland slaying. He was the alleged leader of the Dixie Mafia. He was a hitman himself. And I married him at the age of 19. And I had become a Christian shortly before he was murdered. And instead of singing in nightclubs, I started singing in churches. And shortly after his death, I was singing at the First Baptist Church in Joshua, Texas. The pastor's name there was, last name was James, Pastor James, and the evangelist was Harlan Caton and Jerry Wayne Bernard, Crystal Bernard's daddy. And I was singing with them that week, and I get there a little late just in time to rehearse for the night. Well, back then I really was a looker, and I wouldn't stay in a hotel because I didn't want somebody to be able to say that they saw me doing something I wasn't supposed to do. So I always insisted on staying in the home of somebody in the church, preferably with children. Well, I'm practicing with Drew Wayne. We were doing a duet that night, and this guy walks in, sits down, and he says, "Beverly, this is Mr. Shaw." He said, "Why don't you tell him where you were the day the president was killed?" And I looked at Drew Wayne like, "What in the world are you talking about?" I'm not going to talk about that. He said, "He's really interested in assassination. He studies it. He said, why don't you tell him where you were?" So I sat down by this guy. I thought was just the chairman of the deacons of the church, and I started, just telling him what Drew had wanted me to tell him, and the more I talked, the bigger his eyes get. Well, guess whose home I was staying in that week? Gary Shaw. And he wrote The Cover-Up, one of the first books. And so that night at dinner at his home, everybody came over to his home for dinner. Well, the conversation naturally went to the assassination, and I'm getting more uncomfortable talking about it. And so he said, "Well, let's move into the den," because I didn't know some of these people. I didn't want to talk about it in front of people I didn't know. So he said, "Let's move to the den." We moved into the den, and there was a complete set of the Warren Commission report. I'd never seen one. Didn't know people had that. I mean, that was beyond the scope to me, and so I clammed up. I was scared to death, and I had to stay in the man's house for 5 days. But he was the one that finally got me to tell him almost everything I knew, and took me down to Dewey Plaza, and I showed him where I was standing. It matched the Zapruder film exactly. Of course, this was before the Zapruder film was ever released. And a guy named Penn Jones, and then a man named Richard Sprague, Dick Sprague. He's the one who dubbed me the babushka lady because I had been promised anonymity. I did not want to be public. So then came about the House Select Committee, and they contacted me, and I didn't want to talk to the guy's name was Jack Moriarty. And I hung up on him, and he called again. I hung up on him. Derek, I don't talk about the assassination. Started trying to yell at me. He said, Ms. Massey, don't you hang up the phone on me again. You have to understand I have subpoena power, and we need to sit down and do this nicely, or I'll subpoena you. Well, I made an appointment with them to talk to them, and but with a complete promise of anonymity. And so I made them come. I lived out in Ranger at the time, 5 miles down a dirt road, 200 yards on a mountain, on an 810-acre ranch. I didn't want them out there. I live like I live, reclusive like I do on purpose. And so I made an arrangement to meet them in Cokeville, Texas, at my father-in-law's house, who was the pastor of the First Baptist Church, Cokeville, at the time. So we met there, and I gave them a 2-hour testimony, but whenever you go to read it, the script of it, the transcript of it, it's like 30 minutes. We headed to Indianapolis, Indiana to do a revival. That's what my husband and I do. We're evangelists. And on the front page of the Sunday paper was a picture on one side of it of me then, back in the 60s, and then a picture of me at the present time. And it said, and the article was in between the two pictures, and it said, ex-stripper to give testimony before the House Select Committee in Washington, D.C., something like that. Gave my name, everything about me, and I had been promised anonymity. So that's how I was brought out of the closet. It was never intentional, because I can tell you to this day, I'm not as scared as I used to be, but I still am very careful when I'm out and about. And I still don't appreciate that. I don't appreciate. I will tell them everything that they wanted to know, but I didn't want to be out in the public. If I had it to do all over again, Papa, I'm telling you the truth. If I had it to do all over again, I would still let them believe I'm that hook-nosed woman with the dark hair with my headscarf on that's down by the book depository building.
Well, this what you've been through had to have been rough. I mean, once it came out, I mean, I'm sure now it's a little bit, it's a little bit lighter because I'm sure most of the people have disappeared. But I'm sure that even now you probably get threats.
I haven't had any threats since 1993. Since my book came out in 94, I have not had any threats. I think whoever they are, have figured out I've said everything I'm going to say. It's out in print. What can they do about it now? And,
well, that was smart of you, actually, to do that. That's probably why you're still around. It's one of the reasons, because you did release the book. If you didn't release the book, I did that under the touting of Nigel Turner and Oliver Stone. Well, that too. I mean, the work that you did. You were a technical advisor on Stone's movie, right?
Yes, I was. I was the only one that was hired from day one to day end.
Okay, so we're in the 70s. They you're outed now. Were you harassed at all by the powers that shouldn't be? Was there anything that you had to put up with? Any harassment or anything in between that and when Nigel Turner first met you?
Yes, I did. Back then, like I said, it was before cell phones and things. So when we went to a church, we travel still today in a big bus. We have a overland coach, and we pull up at the church's parking lot, plug into their electricity, their phone back then. We knew how to plug into their phone, and if it rang and it was for us, they would buzz us. Okay, whoever this was calling knew how to do that. We would get calls at these churches, and I would get these threatening calls, like if you do so-and-so and such, you're not going to live to talk about it, and then hang up. Well, my son, Jasper Charles Maskey III, we called him Trey. At the time I gave testimony to Jack Moriarty and the other guy that was with him for the House Select Committee on Assassinations, Trey was 2 weeks old. And I'd had him C-section. He weighed 10 pounds and 4 ounces. And so that's how they threatened me about the House Select Committee. I got a call the day after I gave the testimony before we left for Indianapolis at my mother and father-in-law's home in Cobeville, Texas. And they said, if you don't shut your so-and-so mouth, we're going to get you where it hurts you the most. And this is going to be hard for me to talk about. And so I went on the road and did whatever they asked me to do. And we were in Anderson, South Carolina, in a revival. And we left there on Sunday afternoon to go to Mexico. And we got to Selma, Alabama, and my little boy was breathing hard. And so we checked him into the Children's Hospital there in Selma, Alabama at 11 o'clock in the morning, where at 4:20 the next morning he died. And for years, I thought that I had had something to do with his death because somebody had killed him. They did not know why he died. And they did all kinds of autopsies on him. And said that he died with a 2-lymphoblastic leukemia secondary to primary hyperoxaluria, which was a very, 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 very rare disease, but no one that 2 months and 26 days old had ever died, never has died with a 2-lymphoblastic leukemia. And so I was just destroyed, totally, absolutely destroyed. And then 3 years later, I had a little girl. Her name is Laura. We call her Pebbles. And I know this has been a horrible thing to say, but praise God she was born with the same disorder, because otherwise I would have gone on the rest of my life thinking that I had killed my son. And because of that, she has had 4 transplants. Popeye. She's had 3 kidneys and a kidney and a liver, but she's 32 years old today. And when she was 6 months old, for the first time in medical history, they took my kidney and put in my 6-month-old baby at the University of Minnesota Hospital with Dr. John Manchurian.
Wow, I'm speechless. That's first of all, thank you for sharing that very personal and sad moment with everybody. If you want a minute, Beverly, to take a breather, you can. I totally understand. You're okay?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just a vital part of it for me. It may not mean anything to anybody else, but it was a vital part of my fear.
I can only imagine here you're threatened, where someone says, if you don't shut up, we're going to hit you where it hurts, and then, you lose your child.
Less than 2 months later.
Right. One would only rationally put 2 and 2 together. So I can only imagine how scared you were, and I'm sure by that point you probably that was it. Yeah. I'm sure that put the fear of God into you. So I can't fault you for that. I mean, that's horrific. I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
No parent should ever have to lose a child ever.
Then in 1993, I got 2 letters. It was after I did The Men Who Killed Kennedy, and it was before the release of Oliver Stone's movie JFK. And there were just 2 letters, 2 weeks apart, from Houston, Texas. And one of them, in big black letters, just said death. And at that time, I knew no one in Houston. And then 2 weeks later, I get one from the same zip code that said, snitch, you're dead. And those upset me, and I ended up taking those to the marshal in Lubbock, Texas. We lived in Ranger at the time, and I took it to Lubbock to the marshal. And he said, well, we can't get fingerprints off of this. There's been too many people handling it. But he set me down. And I thank him to this day. If I can't remember what his name was, he told me, he said, Miss Massey, he said, let me tell you something. He said, if these people, whoever they are going to kill you or harm you, they're not going to warn you in advance and give you time to load your gun first. Just remember that. And so that did a lot to make my life easier.
Yeah, so if they're threatening you like that, it's more out of intimidation and fear tactics. Yeah. I'm sure once you lost your child, they probably realized, wow, that's, horrific, and, they might have even used that to their advantage, that, the letting you think that they could have been responsible for it. They play psychological games like that. So that, somebody probably went, they probably had a meeting and went, did anybody do that? No. Okay, well, we're going to use this to our advantage anyway. For whatever reason, and we'll let her think that, and maybe that'll keep her, quiet. And
well, it did for the most part, for a while anyway.
Well, so then, when did Nigel Turner? Because I would assume that's when you next finally came out public, right? Was when you spoke to Nigel, or was it when you published your book?
No, it was Nigel. The only reason that I did the Hill Committee for Nigel Turner. And I did the same thing to Oliver Stone. This is kind of a funny story. Their secretary kept calling me, and I said, look, I don't talk to secretaries. If Mr. Turner wants to talk to me, you have Mr. Turner call me. And he did. We met, and I really liked him. He's a person who you just know that he's trustworthy the first time you ever talk to him. And he told me, I said, I don't want to do it. I said, if it's going to be shown here in the United States. He said, oh, it's not going to be shown here in the United States. He said, it's strictly for Europe. So I felt safe. This is a way I can get my story out for posterity without it becoming a threat to me. Because if people aren't going to see it here in the United States, I'm not going to have to deal with it. So I did it. I'm very proud I did it. I think it's a good piece. But a couple of years later, I think we did that in 88, I think it was. 89, 88. And I found out a couple of years later that he is trying to deal with, I believe it was the Fox network, to get it brought to the United States. And I absolutely went into a panic, and I called my attorney. And he said, Beverly, do you have it in writing? I said, no, but I had his word on it. He said, that doesn't do any good. He said, let me tell you something. The more public you can get, the faster you can get there, the better off and the safer you're going to be. I said, do what? He said, the more public you can become, the safer you're going to be, and you need to do it as fast as you can. It was like less than a month after that Oliver Stone's office called me. And then I had to decide, do I want to be Oliver Stone public? So the same thing. If Oliver Stone wants to call me, I had no clue. I didn't do movies. I still do very few. I said, if Oliver Stone wants to call, if he wants to talk to me, he can call me. And so he called me. I met with him. First thing he asked me, he said, have you seen any of my movies? I said, no, have you seen any of mine? That's the way our friendship started. And I didn't know who Kevin Costner was. He had shown me pictures of Kevin Costner. And but I'm much more educated now about the movie world. Thank you, Papa. I was kind of dumb.
That's kind of funny. I like that. That's funny. Have you seen any of my movies? No. Have you seen any of mine?
Well, I do have a movie. It's about my life story, not having anything to do with the Kennedy assassination. It has to do with my children. And
how many people can just throw out that line like a comeback to Oliver Stone? I mean, how many people can say that they have that little anecdote in history? That's so cool.
It was fun. And I love Oliver Stone. I think he's great. And Kevin and I still keep in touch occasionally. maybe a little bit more than occasionally. And I just, I thank Oliver for allowing me to be part of that movie, because it healed a lot of things in me. It answered a lot of questions for me. And by that, I say that not about the conspiracies or anything like that, but like the first day that they did the headshot, it made me so sick. Somebody in the parking lot and threw up. But that first time that they shot those guns down there in Dealey Plaza, I realized what that smell was I smelled down there that day. It was gunpowder. See, I still had the memory of that stench in my nose, but I didn't know what it was, even though I'd gone hunting with my brother. Dealey Plaza is like kind of down in a hole, and so everything just like drifted down into that hole, the smells and everything. And so when that happened, I knew immediately what that smell I remembered smelling down there that day. It was the gunpowder. And until I did, even after I did the men who killed Kennedy, I would not go through Dealey Plaza. I'd go 15 miles out of my way to keep from driving through that plaza. But now I can go down there. I had not been down there except to take the investigators down there and show them where I was standing. I had not been down there since that day. And now I can, on certain occasions, if somebody's doing a documentary that I really feel good about it, I will go down there for them. I still have a horrible feeling when I'm down there. I don't like it when I'm down there, but I can do it, and that's what's important. I can do it.
It's almost like you have a form of PTSD, and I wouldn't even say almost. I mean, you could have PTSD from any type of traumatic event, and being 20 feet away from the President of the United States and having him having him have his head blown off. And, like you said, that's got to be a very surreal experience, something that, again, only your explanation.
We're going to pause it right there, ladies and gentlemen, because the break is sneaking up on us, top of the hour break. It's only 3 short minutes. When we get back, I will pick it up right where we're leaving off. Probably end up rewinding about a minute for full context, especially for people just joining us in hour number 2. During the break, go check out Beverly's book. It's over on Amazon.com. Nightmare in Dallas by Beverly Oliver and Coke Buchanan. Nightmare in Dallas. Go to Amazon.com, look it up. Purchase it, and she does autograph them. Piece of history, ladies and gentlemen. Suggest you get one sooner rather than later. Alright, stay tuned. We'll be back in a few short minutes. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. It is November 19th, 2013. I'm your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. Tonight I am playing my off-air interview that I did with Beverly Oliver. She is a JFK assassination witness, one of the very last surviving ones out there. And her story needs to be told as many times as possible. As many possible people that can hear it need to hear it. It needs to get out to as many people. This is history. This is something that you're not told. You don't see the mainstream media, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS. You don't see any of them running to beat her door down and interview her for the 50th, do you? No. She was 20 feet from the president when he was shot. Don't you think that it would be in this country's best interest to interview her for history? Nope. You would think at the 50th anniversary they would want to interview one of the last surviving witnesses to the event. Nope. So tonight, I'm giving her as much airtime as she possibly needs. So without further ado, let's get right back into it. I rewound it about a minute for full context. She was talking about the trauma of the event, the trauma that she experienced from the assassination, and then a few days later, watching Jack, her friend Jack Ruby, kill Lee Harvey Oswald on live TV. Here we go.
Until I did, even after I did The Men Who Killed Kennedy, I would not go through Dewey Plaza. I'd go 15 miles out of my way to keep from driving through that plaza. But now I can go down there. I had not been down there except to take the investigators down there and show them where I was standing. I had not been down there since that day. And now I can, on certain occasions, if somebody's doing a documentary that I really feel good about it, I will go down there for them. I still have a horrible feeling when I'm down there. I don't like it when I'm down there, but I can do it, and that's what's important. I can do it.
It's almost like you have a form of PTSD, and I wouldn't even say almost. I mean, you could have PTSD from any type of traumatic event, and being 20 feet away from the President of the United States and having him having him have his head blown off. And, like you said, that's got to be a very surreal experience, something that, again, only your explanation and your level of detail, Beverly, could actually help us understand better than, like you said, the Zapruder film doesn't do it justice. I mean, it's grainy footage as it is. So, I mean, it's, there are still some people to this day that are like, oh my God, that's horrific. And that's just grainy footage. I mean, I can only imagine if they had the cameras that they have now, what the footage would look like. But it still doesn't replace the memory of what your brain actually witnessed and what your subconscious locked away, in your mind 50 years ago. Do you still see it can you still see it clear as day?
Oh, it's just like it happened yesterday. And this is the weird thing about the dreams that I have. When I wake up, I'm expecting to see on TV that he's still alive. So every time I dream that, I relive it, but then also live the expectation of him still being alive till, those few seconds wear off and I'm awake and I know that he's not alive. He's not coming back.
And it's like a very real feeling that you can actually feel.
Mhm. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's almost like I hear on the TV right before I wake up that he was just injured. He is not hurt. He was just injured, and it's Walter Cronkite's voice, and he says, "Oh, breaking news! The president is not dead. He's just severely injured. He's critical, but he's going to be okay." And then I wake up, and he's not okay. He is dead, and the world is still in a pile of crap it's in.
It's interesting how our brains work. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how we compartmentalize traumatic events. People did the same thing with 9/11. For me, it was 9/11 because I was actually very close. I was in North Jersey, and I was a volunteer firefighter at the time. I could actually see the smoke and smell the death from where I lived. So it was, same type of experience. I can understand, but I still not to the level that you have, and nobody could. Only people that were there that day.
But that smell, you will always remember it, won't you?
Oh yeah, there's
nothing
to this day.
Will always remember it.
I know people that have old gear, and they have it locked up. They have it like in bags because of the toxic crap. Mm-hmm. But if they open it and it's anywhere like in the vicinity of a room I'm near or whatever, if I walk by something that came from the site that wasn't washed down and might still have some dust or whatever, I can smell it. In fact, one of the craziest experiences I've ever had, and I've never really talked about this, but I'll tell you about this because I feel comfortable with you, Beverly, and you've experienced traumatic things, so you can appreciate this. A couple of years afterwards, I went up by the fire academy that I had gone to when I was younger, and they had a memorial with some of the steel from the World Trade Center site. Mm-hmm. And I went up and I touched it with my hand. And I hung out there. It was really weird. It was a very serene, cold day. It's about 30 degrees. The snow was out. It snowed, and I was the only one out there. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and you could pull up in the parking lot and just go there and reflect whenever. I think it's still there, as far as I know. So I got out of my car, and I was the only one there, and I walked over, and I was, looking at the memorial, and I leaned over, and I put my hand on it, and I closed my eyes, and I had the most surreal experience. I could feel all the negative energy. I could feel just everything that happened that day. coursing through the metal and into me. And I don't know how to explain it. I've only told one or two other people this story, and when I told them, they kind of looked at me like I had six heads, and I'm like, you've obviously never been that touched or that close to something that, I don't know, maybe, it didn't touch you that way. But for whatever reason, when I touched that metal, I could hear it, I could feel it, I could remember everything from that day. Plus, I could also feel, it's like you could feel the energy coming right out of the steel. So
I know what you're experiencing because there's a couple of days a year that I go down to Dealey Plaza late at night. I can't go down there at the daytime and do any type of meditation or anything because people recognize me. And I'll tell you when I go, it's a certain day every year, 2 days, and I go take a single stem rose and lay where I was standing. And I swear I hear those shots. So I know what you feel. I can't explain it. It's kind of like a deja vu thing. It doesn't happen to me every time, but it does real frequently happen. That it's like I'm sitting there on the curb, and it's like it all happens all over again. Except it's not. It's dark. I can't see. I still would change that day if I could. I've met lots of very interesting people. And another thing that I don't do, Popeye, is I do symposiums and stuff, but all I do is tell what I saw. I'm not a researcher. I do not research the assassination. And that's because when I go to these symposiums and stuff, there'll be these brilliant people speaking, but I don't go listen to them because I still have hope. Now, like Dr. McClellan, I've done a few with him. I'll go listen to the doctors at Parkland and stuff like that because that doesn't affect what I saw down at Dealey Plaza. You see what I'm saying? But people who, I never knew what Gene Hill saw. I still don't know what Mary Mormon saw. I don't know what the Newmans saw or said because I have hopes of someday getting on a witness stand and raising my hand and swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. And I don't want what I saw to be tainted and clouded by what Gene Hill saw or Mary Mormon or this guy or that guy. I want it to be my testimony.
That's smart. That way, because there are times if witnesses sit down and talk to each other, sometimes they fill in the gaps for each other, and then they collectively have the same memory. So that's actually smart. And history actually thanks you because I'm sure you would have liked to have talked to these other witnesses and share your common experience, which is a normal human trait, and yet at the same time, you didn't. And that's actually, you didn't research and go into and try to find out. And that's, as weird as this is going to sound, history kind of owes you for that because you still have your recollection of what you experienced, your perception of what was going on, not your perception mixed with anybody else's. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's not going to be either. And something, though, that I want to share a big blessing through all this, because there's always a small silver lining no matter how dark the day is. And one of the things that I have really appreciated through the years, that since I did the movie JFK, and I was able then to go back down to Dealey Plaza almost every year, I think with the exception of 2 years, I've been invited to participate in the memorial service for JFK, which is it's just astounding to get to do that. And I start off the program usually by singing President Kennedy's favorite hymn, which is Amazing Grace. And I start out with the Star Spangled Banner. And then at 12:30, when he was killed, I step up to the microphone and I sing Amazing Grace. And this year, though, I'm not going to get to do it. On the 50th anniversary, I'm not going to get to do it because they have Dealey Plaza blocked off. So if your listeners are at all interested, I wish they would write the mayor of Dallas, his last name is Rawlings, and have them express their displeasure. First of all, that they can't come, and that a witness who was there can't sing like she always does.
Yeah, it's disgusting what they're doing for the 50th.
It's illegal. It's against the Constitution. It is my constitutional right. On there on the 50th anniversary. It's your constitutional right. They have no right to block that plaza off, none whatsoever. It is restricting my freedom of speech. and my right to enter a public place. It is a historical site. It has been designated as a historical site. They have no right to go down there and block it off. None.
Yeah, and they're doing background checks on people who want to put in to get the tickets to go, because I looked into it about 2 months ago. You know,
I was one of the first ones, and I filled it all out. I don't care. I don't have anything to hide. I filled it all out.
Do you think you'll get like a ticket, or are they just going to say no?
Are you kidding me? They're not going to let me have a. I'll be the most surprised person on the faces, or if I get to go down there, even though I am not one who talks about the government doing it. I'm not one who talks about black helicopters. I don't. I'm there to honor his life and memorialize his death. That's the only reason I go down there. I
think it's ironic that they block people off for a memorial service to a president that actually gave a speech about being open and secrecy and everything else, and secret societies and everything else, and talking about this stuff. And here you have a small select group of people blocking off a very public area.
Not just for that day. They have it the week before and the week after.
Oh, so you can't even go, because I heard it was only going to be for an hour, and then it was going away. So
I think that's what they have started saying now. And if they do that, I'm fine with that. It doesn't matter whether if we're there from 11:30 to 12:30 like we normally are. It's still the plaza. It's still where he was killed. It's still where his blood cries out for justice. I don't care if it's 10 o'clock at night. I just want to be able to go down there and sing my 2 songs and pay respect to my slain president. That's all I want to do.
I didn't know that they actually wanted to do it for a week out, and a week before and a week after.
That's the way it started. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't surprise me. I mean, I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me any. I mean, but I'm sure the huge backlash, because I know that there was backlash to it, so I'm sure that probably helped shorten it. But still,
and there's also some injunctions being filed too.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad people are actually taking, I do air quotes when I say it, legal action, but at least somebody's putting something on paper, on record, doing something, because that's the kind of stuff that needs to get done. I mean, they show their hand, Beverly, when they don't allow you to go down there and sing, especially considering and they don't invite you. Not that like they don't allow you, but like they're going about this the way they are, purposely to block people from certain people from getting in, and they don't invite you to participate because, whatever. Obviously, they have their reasons, but they don't want. Eyewitness gives a different account. What are you talking? Can't have that. Can't talk about that. So they just, they block you from coming in, but they show their hand when they do that. I mean, you've been down there numerous times before, so not inviting you, almost, to me, that actually, if I was sitting on the sideline, I would say, that's odd. This lady always gets a chance to sing there. Why wouldn't you let her and everybody go down there? It's like a thing they do on Kennedy's, the anniversary of the assassination. Why wouldn't you just let them go? So by blocking everybody and doing that, yeah, that does show their hand. I actually plan on being down there this year.
Good.
So,
yeah. My phone number.
Yes, when I get there, I will definitely I will hit you up, because I'm interested in getting a chance to meet a lot of the people that I've gotten a chance to interview in person. So it'd be interesting. Plus, I want to get a chance to film you singing.
I'm going to do it if I have to stand at the edge of the line, where they have it blocked off. I'm going to do it, with or without their permission. They can throw me in jail if they want to. I don't care.
Yeah, were they going to throw you in jail for singing? Although, in the country we live in now, you never know, right? Before I forget to get to a few questions, there's a few other things I did want to ask you really quick. Nigel Turner, after he did the film and everything with you, have you heard from him? Because I know that the last 3 episodes, part 7, 8, and 9, people think that The Men Who Killed Kennedy is only a 6-part series. It's actually a 9-part series.
Nine.
And the last 3 parts got blackballed by Mrs. Johnson. And all the people, I heard the Bushes and the Clintons helped out in that. But, of course, because of the information in the last 3 is extremely damning. But Judith said that she hasn't heard from Nigel. He kind of like fell off the face of the planet. That's, so I was wondering if you had the same experience. Have you heard from Nigel, or did he just up and disappear?
The last time I heard from Nigel was in 2004 when he came to my daughter's wedding. And he came all the way from England to attend my daughter's wedding, and we had a wonderful evening. We set up in our suite till like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, visiting and eating and just having a good time after the reception and everything. And it was just a delightful evening, and he left, and I've not heard from him since.
And did he tell you, at all during the night? I think he had a conversation with you, but he told you what was going on, right? He explained a little bit. He told you that there was a little bit of harassment.
He told me about the History Channel pulling all of his documents. They're not showing any of them, not even 1 through 6 anymore, and that those had been, I forget the word that he used, but confiscated more or less, and they were not going to be allowed to be shown. And I do know one other person that he saw after that. He came back to the United States a couple of weeks. I don't know if he just went to New York and then came to see my friend, or if he went to England and came back. But anyway, a couple of weeks later, he had dinner with a friend of mine that he met during the wedding, and she never heard from him again since then.
Yeah, I wonder what they threatened him with. I mean, obviously,
I don't know.
And he was from England, right? So I mean, Lord knows, Lord knows what they did over there. They probably once he was back across the pond, they probably just told him you cut all ties or that's it. And that was what, back in the 90s?
That was 2004. Or they ran him into a wall in a tunnel.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. He could be gone. I mean, and we'd never know it because as long as the news media didn't pick it up and didn't make a big deal out of it.
And they wouldn't.
Our controlled media make a big deal out of something that they should. Yeah, right. No, they make big deals out of stuff that's not a big deal at all. I did want to ask you really quick. The feds figured out who you were. I'm sure Garrison's crew could have figured out.
Yeah.
So did they ever come down and talk to you at all, or no?
Only by phone. And basically, the scene in the movie where they're interviewing me outside Jack Ruby's club when I was introduced to Lee Harvey Oswald, that happened by phone. And I just told them, they asked me if I would testify. I told them what I thought. And just exactly like it was in the movie, except it was on the phone, he asked me if I would testify for them. And I said, no, I won't. I said, if they can kill the President of the United States in broad daylight and get away with it, they can kill a two-bit showgirl like me and it'll never make the back page of the paper. No, sir, I will not.
And that was just so that piece, like where they came into the club, was added, I guess, for a little bit of drama. But that actually did happen.
Yes, but it happened on phone.
Yes.
And the only other thing that happened that was not exactly as it was portrayed in the movie, well, there were two other things. One thing is that when I was introduced to Oswald by Ruby at the club, David Ferry was sitting at the table. David Ferry was not sitting at the table, but he was at the bar. Oliver had to do some things like that to put the people together that were together without taking up any more time because they are 3 hours and 17 minutes long. And the other thing that he did that I hear people criticizing is the Mr. X testimony in Washington. That was a compilation of 3 people's testimonies. But that's the only way that he can get all that information in that needs to be in. But everything in the movie is accurate as far as the details and the testimony.
A lot of people, they say Mr. X doesn't exist, and you're right. It's off of the 3 different people. But if people want to see, if people want to see who like the base, I would say out of the 3, like the main base of the at least one of the main base of that character would be Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty.
Yeah, that's Fletcher L. Prouty.
Yeah. I mean, people don't. Exactly. I've done entire broadcasts on the man. I mean, he was interesting. I've interviewed Leno Senek multiple times, talking about him. Colonel Prouty was definitely an interesting person, and Mr. X. Obviously, you're right. He had to take a little bit of creative design there to figure out how to get all that information into one character so that people could at least understand it. But the information is real when you go research it. Yes,
it is. And so I have no problems with that kind of literary license as long as the truth is still there. It doesn't change the truth of the testimony at all.
Another thing that you're a puzzle piece for is the fact that Jack Ruby knew Lee Oswald.
And David Ferry. David Ferry was in the club so many times that whenever they, Gary Shaw brought the mug book to Joshua, Texas for me, that he had 3 mug books, and he had me pick people out that I knew and recognized from them, and that's where I found the picture of Regis Kennedy, the manager of my film. And he asked me, I got to David Ferry, and I'm staring at him. He said, "Do you know this man?" I said, "Yes, he was the assistant manager to Jack's Club." That's how much he was in that club, Papa. I thought, because when we went to New Orleans, I believe it was in June or July before the assassination, Jack had gone down to hire some more showgirls, which that's where he got Jada, and from the show bar. And then he said, "I'm going to be looking for an assistant manager. I need some help in the club." So then we get back. We're back, a couple of weeks or so, and this guy starts hanging around, and he's standing by the door, and he's welcoming people in, and he helps himself. Back then they didn't have microwaves and stuff. We just had those little toaster ovens with little bar pizzas in it. And one of the things that Oliver was really shocked about was that Dallas was BYOB back in 1963. Jack did not drink, but he kept a private selection of good liquor behind the bar underneath for whenever he had friends that came in and stuff, his important friends. And this David Ferry dude, would go help himself to Jack's liquor. And I assumed he was the assistant manager that Jack had gone to New Orleans to find. And I was laughed at about that when I was 17 and told, well, I wasn't 17 when I told Gary Shaw that, but when I told Gary Shaw about that, they thought I'd lost my mind. And now you see how deeply ingrained David Ferry is in the assassination.
Very. I actually just did another off-air interview a couple of days ago with Judith about David because she's writing a book about him. So he's a very interesting character. So again, just more. It's interesting how you vindicate a lot of aspects of her story, and then the stuff that she knows about David Ferry and how he knew Ruby and everything, and Lee. It vindicates a lot of the stuff that you talked about. So you can tell when this stuff is real, because people that never have talked to each other, they have stories that they know things that you couldn't know unless it was real. There's a difference between someone acting and faking and someone actually knowing it because you lived it. It's like my mother told me, a false story is easy to forget because it didn't happen. It's not ingrained in your memory, whereas the truth is easy to remember because it's the truth and that memory and actually happened to you. So you actually remember that perception of what happened.
And once you saw David Ferry, you would never forget David Ferry. I mean, Joe Pesci's look in the movie was handsome compared to David Ferry. When people ask him what David Ferry looked like, the only description that I can give of him is he looked like a buzzard. And he looked big. He had little bitty, tiny, beady eyes. And they were kind of far set apart, little tiny eyes, actually. And he had alopecia. I didn't know what that meant back then, but he just said he had something that made his hair fall out. And so he wore this wig that it looked like he had made it himself. It's just the weirdest looking thing I've ever seen. And he took kohl pencils, not an actual eyebrow pencil like I would use, or that the girls use. It was a kohl pencil, and drew this arch over his eyes for eyebrows. It was weird looking.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to pause it right there. Final break of the evening coming up. 3 short, quick minutes, and we will be right back with the final segment and the rest of the interview with Beverly Oliver, one of the last surviving JFK assassination witnesses. Go check her book out, Nightmare in Dallas, available on Amazon.com. I urge you to purchase it. And again, she will autograph every copy. Stay tuned. We are back from break, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. Just incredible testimony from an incredible lady. I can't plug her book enough, Nightmare in Dallas. She has not paid me to plug it. I don't make any commission off any sales. I'm telling you to get her book because it is a piece of history. It is eyewitness testimony from, again, one of the last surviving witnesses. It's untainted, which Beverly gets into during tonight's interview. How she never mixed her information with anybody else's, any of the other witnesses. She never researched and looked into it to any degree. She's never read any books. She doesn't do that because she doesn't want to taint her memories And that's smart. So what she remembers is what was recorded in her brain on that day. And just like anybody that remembers 9/11 vividly that's younger, maybe doesn't know much about the Kennedy assassination, but for an example, if you remember where you were and everything that was going on around you when 9/11 happened, well, it was that way for people our age, and around our age of the time when 9/11 happened, and even younger, like Beverly was 17 years old. So she has a fresh operating mind, and that traumatic experience has now heightened all of her senses, and just like it does with all of us, right? And it is now going into record mode. And what she has, the information that she has in her head, is what she witnessed and what she experienced. It's not tainted or mixed with anybody else's. So go get her book, Nightmare in Dallas, and she does autograph them again. And she is just one of the sweetest people I've ever met on this planet. She really is a genuinely nice human being. So purchase her book just to help support her. But purchase it because it's a piece of history as well. And you know how I am about books. I always tell you, get a physical copy of a book. It's better to have a physical copy of a book than any type of e-book that could be out there at all. Just go get a physical copy of her book. Again, Amazon.com, Nightmare in Dallas. All right, let's get back into it with the rest of the interview. Picking up where we left off, she was talking about David Ferrie, so I rewound it a minute or two so full context of the conversation could be understood. So I rewound it right back to where we started talking about David. So here we go.
Another thing that you're a puzzle piece for is the fact that Jack Ruby knew Lee Oswald.
And David Ferrie. David Ferrie was in the club so many times that whenever they, Gary Shaw brought the mug book to Joshua, Texas for me, that he had 3 mug books, and he had me pick people out that I knew and recognized from them, and that's where I found the picture of Regis Kennedy, the manager of my film. And he asked me, I got to David Ferrie, and I'm staring at him. He said, "Do you know this man?" I said, "Yes, he was the assistant manager at Jack's Club." That's how much he was in that club, Papa. I thought, because when we went to New Orleans, I believe it was in June or July before the assassination, Jack had gone down to hire some more showgirls, which that's where he got Jada, and from the show bar. And then he said, "I'm going to be looking for an assistant manager. I need some help in the club." So then we get back. We're back, a couple of weeks or so, and this guy starts hanging around, and he's standing by the door, and he's welcoming people in, and he helps himself. Back then they didn't have microwaves and stuff. We just had those little toaster ovens with little bar pizzas in it. And one of the things that Oliver was really shocked about was that Dallas was BYOB back in 1963. Jack did not drink, but he kept a private selection of good liquor behind the bar underneath for whenever he had friends that came in and stuff, his important friends. And this David Ferrie dude, would go help himself to Jack's liquor. And I assumed he was the assistant manager that Jack had gone to New Orleans to find. And I was laughed at about that when I was 17 and told, well, I wasn't 17 when I told Gary Shaw that, but when I told Gary Shaw about that, they thought I'd lost my mind. And now you see how deeply ingrained David Ferrie is in the assassination.
Very. I actually just did another off-air interview a couple of days ago with Judith about David because she's writing a book about him. So he's a very interesting character. So you're, again, just more, it's interesting how you vindicate a lot of aspects of her story and then the stuff that she knows about David Ferrie and, how he knew Ruby and everything and Lee. It vindicates a lot of the stuff that you talked about. So you can tell when this stuff is real because people that never have talked to each other, they have stories that they know things that you couldn't know unless it was real. There's a difference between someone acting and faking and someone actually knowing it because you lived it. It's like my mother told me, a false story is easy to forget because it didn't happen. It's not ingrained in your memory, whereas the truth is easy to remember because it's the truth and that memory and actually happened to you. So you actually remember that perception of what happened.
And once you saw David Ferrie, you would never forget David Ferrie. Joe Pesci's look in the movie was handsome compared to David Ferrie. When people ask you what David Ferrie looked like, The only description that I can give of him is he looked like a buzzard. And he really did. He had these little bitty, tiny, beady eyes. And they were kind of far set apart, little tiny eyes, actually. And he had alopecia. I didn't know what that meant back then, but he just said he had something that made his hair fall out. And so he wore this wig that it looked like he had made it himself. It's just the weirdest looking thing I've ever seen. And he took kohl pencils, not an actual eyebrow pencil like I would use, or that the girls use. It was a kohl pencil, and drew this arch over his eyes for eyebrows. It was weird looking.
Yeah, I have pictures of him, and I've seen pictures of him, and David was an interesting looking character, to say the least. If you
never forget it.
Yeah, you could tell that if you met him in real life, like he's one of those people, and I've met people like him. I used to work in South Beach, and I used to run a tattoo shop, and I met some interesting characters while working down there. So, like, I know what you mean. Like, when he's one of those people that even if you only were around him for a brief period of time or saw him maybe for a couple months or whatever, it doesn't matter. He's one of those people that you never forget. You know, the image of him, because he sticks out because he's so out of the ordinary, and that's usually the same description that everybody has of David Ferrie.
A lot of sadness involved in it. The biggest tragedy, of course, is to America losing our president. But I think should he have lived, the world would be a different place. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. Either like the little girl that you were talking about, that you educated her on the death of the president. It didn't just change America; it changed the whole complexion of the world, of the whole world. Because as America goes, there goes the world.
How many different wars might not have happened?
Well, we wouldn't have 86,000 men on that wall in Washington.
Well,
if the president had lived.
Vietnam wouldn't have happened.
That's what I'm talking about. There wouldn't be those 86,000 men on that wall.
I wonder if the first Gulf War and the second Gulf War would have happened. Perhaps would 9/11 happen? Because I mean, I don't buy the official version of that either. So would 9/11 have happened? I mean, I think the world would be a drastically different place.
Well, for one thing, America would still have the respect that we had back in '63. And we would have still had the power. We would have still had the moral standing that we no longer have. Do you realize back in 1963 that the three biggest problems they had in our schools was running in the halls, talking in class, and chewing gum? Those were the three biggest problems in our schools in 1963. Now, it's unwed pregnancies, violence, and drugs.
Drastically different.
Mm-hmm.
Like the complete opposite end of the spectrum, I would say.
Mm-hmm. It couldn't be any more polarly opposite.
And how long, by the way, was it 75 years from the date of the assassination that all of those records are in the film and everything, that, like, including your film footage, because it's still locked up somewhere in some vault. What did they say originally? 75 years it's going to take for that stuff?
I think it was 75. Like I said, I'm not a researcher, but I think it was 75. I think it's due to be released in 2026.
And that's because obviously they want to make sure that every witness is dead, everybody connected to it is dead. That way, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And it'll just be
it'll all be redacted anyway. Like if you were to go make a FOIA, Freedom of Information request, on Roscoe White, which was the policeman I saw on the plaza that day, you'll get maybe 2 paragraphs, and everything else of all the pages that you'll get will be redacted.
That's typical. So if you look up Roscoe White, it'll just come back.
Go ahead and make a FOIA request for his name. And
it'll come back with just, because I've seen what they look like when they redact them. You'll get it'll have the header of the page and then just black lines all the way down the page. And here you go. Here's your Freedom of Information. And you're like, yeah, there's no information on here. There's lines of black ink. This doesn't help me. Well, it's paperwork. The law says we have to give you the documents. Yeah, but there's supposed to be information that's on the documents.
Either the Bush or the Clinton order, I don't remember which one of them it was, said unredacted copy. But you see, redaction is my understanding. I was explained to, I believe it was John Newman, Major John Newman, that they don't blackout, like we see it, like we think it's blacked out, like with a marker. It's actually cut out. It is cut out and then put on the black screen and copied. That's why it looks like it's black markers.
Well, that's smart. Because there's no way you can because if it was copied with black ink over it, you'd probably be able to pick up the image beneath it if you had a good scanner.
Now they have ways of pulling the layers away with laser.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense that they would literally just cut it out with a razor blade and then put a black screen behind it.
Yep, that's exactly what they do. Or that's what I was told by Dr. Major John Newman.
Can you imagine how boring that job has to be? It's got to be like a room full of cubicles where people just have paperwork and X-Acto knives, and they're just cutting stuff out and then throwing that into a shredder or something.
Don't you think, though, that there has to be people that are trusted with that information? It couldn't be like just the general public person that's hired to be a janitor or whatever in the archival or whatever. It has to be somebody with a little knowledge, first of all, to know what they need to cut out.
Very true, because it's not like the paperwork. I'm sure they just don't hand it to them with big red markers with the stuff highlighted out with, cut here.
No, they don't. And so, I keep hoping, and people keep saying, somebody's going to talk someday, and I'm waiting for that someday. I really am. Because I know there's people out there that still has knowledge that they've never told. Maybe there's a threat of the death of their children or whatever. They don't talk, or maybe there are some genuine kind of sort of patriots that was involved in it that thought that they were involved with it because it was the best for our country or something. That's a possibility. That people were so brainwashed and so hogwashed that they participated thinking, well, this is what's the best for my country. I'm going to do it because it's what's best for my country. And it was what destroyed our country.
Oh, yeah. The fear, I find that fear, I've asked a lot of other people I've interviewed about this that were either like Judith or anybody else that might have been connected to it, not so much researchers, but like people like yourself. And they say, I always ask them, do you still have that fear of, whatever that monster that you feared back then? Do you still have that fear of it? And everybody always says yes. I mean, do you feel the same way?
Yeah, and one of the reasons is because what are we the most afraid of? The unknown. The unknown. I think if I knew who they are, this is frightening. It's like we always see the devil as a dude in a red suit with a pitchfork, and we don't recognize him as that angel of light when he comes. And that's the way I think we are about whoever they are that killed our president. They don't come to us in a red suit, in a pitchfork, and a forked tail. They come to us as an angel of light.
I always say to people, kind of like the same way, people ask me about like the top of the tier, when they talk about the powers there shouldn't be, or the Illuminati, whatever people call them, right? And they say, well, who is it? Somebody who, is there a castle somewhere where they live? Like, what kind of, opulent palace do they live in? And I said, honestly, they're probably like these old mafia dons. They probably live in a ramshackle old house. They probably drive a 30-year-old vehicle, and you'd never have any clue that they are who they are. And that's why you don't know who they are, because of how they handle themselves.
They're your next door neighbor.
Exactly.
They're the person that checks you out at the grocery store.
That little old dude that bags your groceries that you think is there because he must have lost all of his money in some sort of Ponzi scheme or something. Yeah, no.
They come to you as an angel of light, which means honesty and forthrightness. That's just not the way it is. But I just really hope that I'm alive when the truth comes out. I really, that's my dream. I have only recently started doubting that I would be, but I still have that little seed of hope, Popeye, and nobody's ever going to kill it.
Well, honestly, Beverly, you are already alive, and I think the truth has come out already. Like, as a researcher myself, because I know you did, like you said, you don't do a ton of research because you don't want to taint your memories, which is smart. But I myself as a researcher can tell you that the truth is pretty much out there. I mean, even the government doesn't, they could redact everything that they want. They could take everything off the page except for the header and the date. And you know what? Wouldn't matter. Because there's so much information out there now that, like I said, it's more than it's like something like 92% of the country believes that just from the evidence alone that the government did it. And there would be gaps that would be nice to be filled in. Don't get me wrong, but I believe that you can rest easy at night knowing that the truth, just from what I've seen, the truth is, like I said, it would be nice to fill in the gaps here and there, but the truth is pretty much well known, and again, it's because of the courage, like people like yourself, that even though there was that fear out there, and you knew that there was something to be, somewhat afraid of, you still, no matter what, I mean, you went through some pretty horrific stuff, even blaming yourself at one point, and you still, after you went through that, you still had the courage to push forward. I mean, I even though that wasn't to blame, I know so many people that would have been just put off by even thinking that would have frightened them about anything in the future and kept them from doing anything, and yet that didn't stop you. So I have to thank you, Beverly, and the world, not just this country, but the world and history owes you a debt of gratitude, my dear, because without your courage, we wouldn't be privy to the eyewitness plus background information that about, like Jack and Lee and David Ferry. Not that it's a ton of information, just to say, yeah, I know you knew Jack, but just the fact that enough information that's a big chunk of the puzzle. Like I said, that people might not put together right off the bat, but that's a big piece. And that takes a lot of courage to talk about stuff like that. So history owes you a lot. History really does owe you, because you still had the courage to not only talk about your experience, but then talk about the other background stuff you knew, and then even add your own personal experiences over the course of time. As I said, you yourself are a large part of the history of the assassination of President Kennedy, and I thank you so much for your time today, and again, the courage that it takes to stand up.
Well, I want to say one thing before we get off of here.
Go ahead.
And that is that I just want to thank you, and men like you and women like you who have picked up the torch, who've picked up the burden, who's carrying it to the end and researching and digging and plowing and prodding and not giving up, because y'all are the reason that we know what we know.
And before you go, Beverly, I want you to give yourself shameless plugs. If you have a website, I want you to plug it, and if wherever anybody can purchase your book, go ahead and please let everybody know. I want them to be able to purchase the book. And ladies and gentlemen, I don't do this unless I'm going to do it myself, but you should purchase the book, and I'm going to purchase a copy of her book myself. Get it, because it's important. So where can they purchase a copy of it?
Well, before I tell them that, I just want to tell you how humbled I am that you said what you said to me, and how much I appreciate your support, and I will always appreciate it. And I thank you for it. And my website is www.massegee, spelled MASSEGEE.org. And then you just go in there and you hit on products, and it'll take you to my CDs and my book. Or you can usually get it on Amazon.com. And it's called Nightmare in Dallas by Beverly Oliver and Colt Buchanan.
Well, I urge everybody to buy it right from the website, because I know that if you buy it from the website, you guys get, buying it from the website helps the author out more than it does if you get it from Amazon, because Amazon always has to give the author a little less, because that's their deal. They offer things for less. So go to the website first, Amazon second, because going directly to her website supports her. And, it's not like she makes a ton of money off this, but she sticks her neck out telling you the truth. The least you could do was purchase the book right from her and her website.
I'll autograph that way. Whether you want it or not, I autograph every book that leaves my house. That's my honor to get to sign that book.
Well, you see, and again, you're a living piece of history, Beverly. So, ladies and gentlemen, go to her website, purchase the book. Not only will you get the book, but she's going to autograph it for you as well. That is awesome. Beverly, again, it's been an honor being able to sit here and talk your ear off for over 2 hours now. You are definitely a gracious Southern lady, and the younger generation could learn a thing or two from your generation for sure, without a shadow of a doubt.
And there's one other statement I want to make, the last statement in my book, and that is that the pledge to our flag, the last statement is, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And my question is, does that justice pertain to our presidents?
Thank you so much for coming on, Beverly, and it's been an honor.
You. Well, Papa, it has been fun.
And I look forward to seeing you in November. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
There she goes, ladies and gentlemen, Beverly Oliver. I urge you to get her book, Nightmare in Dallas. Go to Amazon.com, purchase it. She autographs them. She's one of the last surviving witnesses to the assassination. And as you heard, she didn't taint her testimony by going and sitting and having coffee with other witnesses and comparing notes and everything else, or going and listening to other researchers, and then allowing her brain to formulate new thoughts and taint what she actually had witnessed. Nope. She kept that clear and clean. We actually owe her for that. Whether or not you realize that, ladies and gentlemen, we owe her for that. Because we have this untainted, clean memory of that day. So, purchase the book. I promise you won't be sorry. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, before we run out of time here, because we have a few minutes left, this weekend, the 23rd, the 24th, and the 25th, there will be a free conference memorializing the 50th anniversary of the assassination of President Kennedy. Speakers will include Jim Mars, Ed Haslam, Chris Milligan of Trine Day Publishing, Judith Very Baker, Dick Russell, myself, Beverly Oliver, and others. You don't want to miss this conference. It's going to be a good one. So make sure, if you're around in the area, if you're anywhere in the vicinity, even a few hours drive away, come down. It's a weekend. Make it a 2-day weekend trip or whatever. And Trine Day is going to be down there. Like I said, Chris Milligan's going to be down there. He's going to have a bunch of books from a bunch of different authors with him for sale. I know Jim Mars is going to be there. Any of the authors that show up are going to have their books for sale. I'm sure Beverly Oliver will have her books for sale. She's going to be there. She's got a book about her experience, as you all know, mentioned here tonight. So if you're in the area, you're going to be anywhere around Arlington, Texas, the weekend of the 23rd, the 24th, and the 25th, come on over to the Eunice Center, 1000 Eunice Street, Arlington, Texas. It starts 1 p.m. on November 23rd, Arlington, Texas. Be there. And also, if you're interested in learning more about the JFK assassination, I have an entire download archive section on federaljack.com. Go over to the download section, and when you go to the download page, I think it's the second or third one down, it says it might be the second one, it says JFK archive. Click on that, it'll open up a page, and it's a very basic, like 1990s style root directory listing, and everything in there will show up as a blue hyperlink. Just right click on it and hit save as, and then whatever you want to title it. It should come up with the title of the video, though, or whatever ebook or audio. It should come right up with the title that I already have there, and just save it to whatever hard drive or wherever on your computer, and download away for free. That's why it's there. Included is the entire YouTube channel that Judith Very Baker has set up, with a bunch of different videos that she's put together over the course of time, and information exonerating Lee Oswald. So if you go to the JFK section, her entire YouTube channel, I backed it up and I put it up there, as well as a ton of other information, PDFs, audio, videos, the entire Men Who Killed Kennedy series, including the missing pieces 7, 8, and 9. All the broadcasts I've done on JFK, just a ton of information up there, all for free. Go check it out, rip it, download it, take it. That's what it's for. Ladies and gentlemen, we are out of time. I'll catch you all again live tomorrow night. Remember, all week long special JFK broadcasting. I know the tunnel seems dark and long, ladies and gentlemen, but I can see the light at the end of it, and I know that after each broadcast I do, you can too. The truth is not always pretty, sometimes it is horrific, but it is still the truth, and that will lead us to that light at the end of that tunnel, and I'm with you every step of the way, so don't be afraid. Catch you all again tomorrow night. Love you all. I'm out.